Hey everyone, and welcome. We are about to dive into a story that honestly sounds like it's straight out of science fiction, but I promise you, it is 100% real. It's all about a tiny creature that might just hold the secret to one of biology's biggest, oldest mysteries, radical regeneration. So, let's get right into it.
No, really. Just stop and think about that for a second. What if you could lose a limb, an organ, or, even your head, and then just grow a new one? For us, that's completely impossible, right? But for the humble little worm we're talking about today, well, it's just another Tuesday.
All right, so who is this little master of regeneration? Let's meet the star of our show.
This right here is the Planarian flatworm. You can slice it into a bunch of pieces, and I mean a bunch of them, and each and every one of those pieces will regrow into a complete, perfectly formed worm. It's incredible. This whole superpower is fueled by stem cells that can become any part of the body. And you can see why scientists are kind of obsessed with this worm, specifically Digigia japonica, because it's basically a living laboratory for understanding how life builds and rebuilds itself.
So, how on earth does it work? Well, when a Planarian gets injured, a whole mass of special cells called a blastema rushes to the wound site. The best way to think about the blastema is like a biological construction site. It's where all the raw materials and all the workers gather to build a brand new head or a brand new tail from scratch.
But any construction site is total chaos without a good plan and a foreman in charge. So how did scientists figure out who was calling the shots? Well, this is where the whole thing turns into a high-tech detective story.
To figure out what was happening inside that blastema, researchers used this really powerful three-pronged approach. First, they mapped the entire area to see exactly which genes were switched on and where. Think of it like a heat map of activity. Next, they identified every single cell type involved, kind of like taking attendance of all the construction workers on site. And third, they used another high-tech tool to check the DNA blueprints to see which genetic constructions were unlocked and ready to be read.
So as you can imagine, this investigation created an absolute mountain of data. After sifting through all of it, they managed to narrow down a list of thousands of possible genes to just a handful of key players, the foreman of the whole operation.
And they zeroed in on 24 really important genes called transcription factors. Now, these aren't your average worker cells. Think of them as the site foreman. Their job is to read the master DNA blueprint and then give very specific instructions to all the other cells, telling them what to build, where to build it, and when.
And among these 24 foremen, just one, stood out from the crowd. Its activity just went through the roof at the exact moment the blastema started building new tissues. The scientists were pretty sure they had their prime suspect.
And its name is DGTCF4. This was the gene that really seemed to be calling all the shots. I mean, its sudden, intense activity right there at the construction site, it just made it the #1 focus of the entire investigation.
But look, in science, having a prime suspect isn't enough. You need proof, cold, hard evidence. So the scientists designed a brilliant experiment to find out if DGTCF4 was really in charge of the whole show.
They used a technique called RNA interference, or RNAi, which lets you temporarily turn off a specific gene. It's like sending the lead foreman home for the day. The question was simple, right? If you take the person in charge off the job, what happens to the whole construction project?
The results were, well, they were staggering. A normal worm, as you see, regenerates perfectly with 2 eyes and a nice pointed tail. But without DGTCF4, the worm became a cyclops. It grew a single eye right in the middle of its head. Its tail was all blunt and malformed, and the entire regeneration process was super delayed. This was the smoking gun. Definitive proof.
And get this, for the few worms that did eventually manage to grow a second eye, it took an extra 2 to 4 weeks to show up. That's an eternity in worm time. This proved that DGTCF4 wasn't just important for getting the shape right, it was absolutely critical for getting the timing of development perfect. So, with all this clear evidence in hand, the scientists could finally write up a complete and official job description for this super important gene.
And really, this quote just sums it all up perfectly. DGTCF4 is the master foreman of regeneration. It doesn't pour the concrete or hammer the nails itself, but it directs the entire project to make sure every single thing happens correctly and right on schedule.
So let's break down its official duties. First, it's in charge of the timing and organization of all the different cell types. It also makes sure there's a steady supply of fresh stem cells, the raw building materials. And, crucially, it activates a whole network of other genes, just like a foreman directing all the different teams of subcontractors on a job site.
So it makes perfect sense now, right? Without GTCF4 on the job, the whole regeneration process becomes slow, disorganized, and just full of major mistakes, like building one eye instead of two.
Okay, a Cyclops worm is fascinating stuff for sure. But what does all this research actually mean for the bigger picture? I mean, why should we really care about the genetics of a tiny little flatworm?
Well, here's why. Because by studying these master genes like DGTCF4, we're not just learning about Planarians. We are literally uncovering the fundamental instruction manual for how life itself builds and rebuilds tissue. The same basic rules for coordinating cells and timing development are at play in all animals, including us.
And that leaves us with this final, really tantalizing thought. Understanding the master foreman in this little worm gives us a blueprint. So could cracking the Planarians' complete genetic code one day unlock new ways for us to heal injuries, treat diseases, and maybe, just maybe, even regenerate parts of ourselves? The answer is still out there, waiting to be discovered in the biology of this absolutely incredible creature.